Minister, this is your first set of questions as Minister for Finance. You could make yourself very popular if you were to announce that the government is going to scrap what is probably the most hated tax in history, the universal social charge, introduced as a temporary charge. If you announced that you would scrap it for all income under €100,000.
Thanks very much, Deputy, for raising this issue. The universal social charge was designed and incorporated into the Irish taxation system in 2011 to replace two other charges, namely the health and income levies. The primary purpose of the USC was to widen the tax base and to provide a steady income to the Exchequer to provide funding for public services. The USC is an individualised tax, meaning that a person's liability to the tax is determined on the basis of a person's own individual income and personal circumstances. It is a more sustainable charge than those it replaced and is applied at a low rate on a wide base, which ensures that it is a stable and sustainable source of revenue to the state. The USC yield was €5.4 billion in 2023, with a similar yield expected in 2024. The USC is an important source of revenue to the Exchequer to fund public services. Currently, there is an exemption from USC for any individual who earns less than €13,000 per annum. It is estimated that in 2024, 37% of all taxpayer units will be exempt from USC. With regard to your proposal, I'm advised by Revenue that the cost of increasing the USC exemption limit to €100,000 in 2024 is estimated at €2.2 billion and €2.5 billion on a first and full year basis, respectively. As such, this proposal would give rise to a shortfall of over €2 billion that would have to be generated from alternative sources. Furthermore, it would significantly narrow the tax base and place an increasing reliance on a smaller number of taxpayers. This in turn would expose our economy to significant risks in the event of a future economic downturn. Ireland has one of the most progressive personal income tax systems in the world, which plays a crucial role in the process of income redistribution. Our redistributive tax system has been acknowledged by the IMF, the OECD and the ESRI, and it is my view that a broad-based progressive income tax system where the majority of income earners make some contribution but according to their means is the fairest and sustainable income tax system in the long term. As such, I have no plans to abolish the USC for individuals earning less than €100,000 per annum.
Thanks a lot. Minister, do you accept that the universal social charge was introduced as effectively a bank bailout tax? Always in this answer you have, it was the combining of two taxes, but in reality it was a massive increase of those taxes, generating a lot more revenue for the state, and that it was intended to be a temporary measure. It was an emergency measure in response to the crisis, effectively to give money to enable the bailout of the banks. It was intended to be done away with, but yet we're stuck with it. I mean, even the general election before last, the leader of Fine Gael, Leo Varadkar, they made an election promise to say that they would scrap the USC. Obviously, they formed the government and they didn't scrap the USC, so they betrayed that promise. But now, at a time when we have projected surplus over the coming years of €65 billion, is it not time to give ordinary workers a break and to lift this burden from them?
Thanks, Deputy. The USC has played and plays a vital part in meeting many expenditure demands placed on the Exchequer. As I've said, the yield from the USC at over €5 billion is an important source of revenue to fund all of our public services, and as such I have no plans to abolish the USC. It is important to point out that in 2016, Joint Department of Finance and ESRI research found that it represented a more stable form of revenue than income tax. The findings highlighted that the USC revenues would fluctuate by less than income tax revenues whenever income is volatile, for example, where the economy moves from a point of significant growth to contraction. And given the openness of the Irish economy and susceptibility to economic shocks, the contribution that the USC makes is really important in the context of stability for the state's revenue sources, which you have to recognise is important. I mean, earlier you were referencing making a greater contribution from the Central Exchequer to abolish the TV licence and to fund other expenditure demands, and now you're asking us to abolish the USC. That's narrowing our tax base and significantly increasing expenditure. That's not a sustainable fiscal position.
Thanks. I mean, every year in our budget, we outline how this can be done, and actually we increase revenue that the state raises, and we broaden our tax base by going after the major corporations in this country that pay very, very little tax. We take the burden off ordinary workers, those who are earning less than €100,000, and we introduce a millionaire's tax. We have a high income social charge, we have increased rates of income tax, and we make sure the corporations actually pay their tax and increase the rate of corporation tax. So it can be done, it is a political choice. I mean, do you accept that it is fundamentally dishonest, and obviously you're only Minister for Finance now, so it's not on you, but to use a crisis to introduce a new tax, to let everyone think that this is a temporary emergency measure, and then to say, well, this is now a very, very good measure for raising revenue, so we're going to keep it. I would also warn you, I think this will be an issue in the coming general election. I mean, came up again and again and again in the local and European elections. People still hate this tax, and they know that it was meant to be temporary. They want to see it gone, and I think you will pay a political price if you don't concede to that.
Look, I've already set out the position. It's an important revenue source to fund many of the public services that we've seen. And if you take to make this proposal cost neutral, it would require significant changes where, for example, by way of example, the proposal would have the effect of increasing the top marginal rate of tax from 52% and 55% to 60.5% and 63.5% for PAYE and self-employed income earners respectively. And it's very significant and increased high marginal tax rates are a clear disincentive to work and would also cause harm to our international competitiveness. And you're assuming the corporations you're speaking about that you reference in your pre-budget submission every year would stay here under a government led by you. Many of them would fear, and many workers in those companies would fear you leading a government where they'd abandon our country. They'd fear you abandoning our enterprise and industrial policy, which has brought 2.7 million people in full employment now. Very significant surplus that we're running, €3.1 billion so far this year. So we can put that money aside for the future so that if our economy does slow in the future, we have the ability to intervene. All of that economic planning would implode under your fiscal and economic policy. And assuming you can tax everyone and every corporation on the basis that they would stay is just farcical in my view.
Questions?